Welcome to From Stardust to Us, in-depth conversations with thought leaders, artists, and spiritual activists, navigating the challenges of our times with integrity, joy, and purpose. I'm Bernice Marie Daly.
And I'm Linnell Hayden. Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate our listeners. You can find us on YouTube, Buzzsprout, or any place where podcasts are found. If you enjoy our conversation, please help us reach more people by subscribing, liking, and commenting. So let's get into this week's conversation.
We're delighted to have you with us, Dianne. Dianne Disston, the Reverend Dianne Disston. Dianne is a spiritual guide, certified grief counselor, and a licensed psychoanalyst. Last fall, after 14 years of service, Dianne retired as the director of the apprenticeship program at the Guild for Spiritual Guidance. And she is now focused on her private practice as a spiritual guide, grief counselor, and psychoanalyst. The loves of her life are Todd, her husband of 45 years, and her adult children, David and Ashleigh. She also loves to read fiction and nonfiction. She loves communing with nature and with love, which she considers as identified as her creator. And she loves deeply listening as her clients explore their inner truths. So, welcome once again, Dianne. So many ways we could go with this.
So much to talk about these days, and it's so good to see you, Linnell and Bernice. So good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you. So I thought I would begin with a little dip into our national, international anxiety and grief and fear, noting some of the national, political, international turmoil that is influencing everyone these days. We could talk about it in a number of ways. I thought we might want to look at marginalized groups. And if there was any particular thought you might have or direction you might go with this, and then we'll just carry forward.
Well, for me, the way that the world is going these days and what we're all feeling like we're up against maybe in our country, I'll speak for myself, what I feel like I'm up against in our country. I've had to do some real deep soul searching and kind of there's so many things I could be supporting and working with, toward a more peaceful, loving world, uh, and a world that survives. There's just all of that. And I've really landed on a couple of different things, and one of them is to do my best to be an accomplice. This is a new word I'm learning, to be an accomplice rather than just an ally, which was a word we used a lot in the past for the LGBTQ plus community. And the reason for that is because I have family members who I love dearly who are in that community, and I am devastated by what is happening and the deepening oppression that is occurring just when we thought we were raising our heads above the water, maybe a little bit. And because of that, and understanding the grief that this brings up, and this isn't an oppressed community, but we're all feeling oppressed in some ways right now, or many of us are. And there's so much grieving work that needs to be done, so much work in community and with one another and in support of one another. I think it's huge. I think we all need to find our islands in the sand, so to speak, in order to reconnect with our center. So
you piqued my interest with so I'm going to jump off on this question, which is not something I had thought of previously, but you brought up how you are switching your language to accomplice instead of ally, and language is so important in how we see the world. that's why to truly understand other cultures and groups, it's important to understand their language as well. So can you explain how that changes your view of your role in all of this?
Yeah, so this is the way it was explained to me and how I'm holding it, I guess. That as an ally, I've always been there to support and listen and hold up the LGBTQ community or many other communities that might be marginalized or oppressed, right? Um, but as an accomplice, I'm doing more than simply supporting. I'm taking action in any way that I possibly can to challenge whatever systems are oppressing that group of people.
Mm,
So um, that's that's really given me a bit of a spark toward my personal love of sacred activism
yeah.
and to begin to really seek out those places, those organizations, those nonprofits that are in the world that are taking action to eliminate the systems that oppress, you
Yeah,
know?
and that even has a different flavor than advocate, doesn't it? To
Yes.
me, accomplices, you're in there, you're right in there in the dirt with them in a good way.
Yes.
Earthy
Boot,
dirt.
boots on the ground. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's important these days, right? I mean, I think it's important to also, well, maybe we'll get into this, but there's so many things we can do. We definitely, the activism is critical. And in order to support ourselves in that role as accomplice, we need to care for ourselves and encourage those who are marginalized to care for themselves as well, you know?
So, yeah, we are definitely going through a national and maybe even a worldwide sort of dark night of the soul, right? A descent into the underground, which, in myth, you have to descend in order to rise again with a new understanding and a new way of living. So this is all a shedding, and as painful as it is. And the hope is that in this darkness, we leave behind the things that we've been clinging to, the overconsumption and the narcissism, the individuality, the individualism, the looking at these very highly successful, rich people as the leaders, so to speak. And as we shed all of that through this grieving, this mass grieving, we can emerge with a different understanding and perhaps a new way of holding the sacredness of life and understanding our deep connections to each other and to all life. And, perhaps overcome the illusion of separation that has caused so much pain and suffering. And I'm wondering, so it's important how I think what we do as individuals and with each other in this darkness, as we're in the descent. So are there any rituals or either people can do that, that you do with the communities you work with to help them, or as individuals, maybe perhaps something if somebody's living alone and they're just feeling very lost, and what things can we do so that we are not destroyed by this, but rather transformed?
Yeah, I mean, what I want to say is for me, it's always about relationship, right? It's about finding others. It's about reaching out, not isolating. I'll give you I'll give you an example. Last night, I found myself feeling kind of dysregulated. It was a rough day in the news. And I was, I've been feeling like like every day is a rough day in the news, but I've been feeling like I've been kind of, yep, got it. I'm doing my meditation every morning, every night. I have rituals that are that are really important for me personally. But at the end of the day yesterday, I couldn't do it alone. I could feel myself sort of getting a bit frazzled. And so I knew the planets were aligning last night. The 7 planets were aligning, and I really didn't know where they were, but I have this app on my phone that, you can look up and find them wherever they might be. And I went outside and I started to look for where they were. And I was like, oh, there you are, Mars. Hi, Mars. Oh, Jupiter. Oh my God, it's Jupiter right up there. And before you know it, I guess my friends who live right next door to me in this little community started to hear me, and they were opening their windows going, are you looking at the planets? And I was like, yes, I'm looking at the, and there were like 4 or 5 of us out there before you know it, just looking at the planets. And then after that, we we just sat and sort of, we took stairs and started to talk and tell each other how much we cared about each other. And, and when I came in, I was on a high. I felt so much better. Didn't change a darn thing in the world, did it? But boy, did it change my inner being. And when I'm changed, I can be a better person to other people. And I think that has a trickle effect in the world. And I would hope that all of those other people that came out last night, that it would have had the same effect. So are there rituals? Are there things we can do? Seek others who think a lot like you do. Seek others who are willing to run out in the middle of the night and look for planets in the sky or whatever your looking for the planets is. Um, you have to regulate yourself. You have to find ways to regulate yourself and get in touch with that. It's the love for me. When I wake up in the morning, that's what I'm connecting with. I'm reminding myself to live my life through this place. And I can get pulled off that very easily because of all that's happening. But when I feel myself going off center, I have to remind myself about love. I have to. And that's where I have to live my life from. Because as Bernice said in the intro, for me, love is my God, my divine presence, all of that. Yeah, that was a mouthful.
So very funny. I went out, I was having a conversation with some friends last night about energy and flowing energy and us, we humans transforming in our consciousness and such. And then I said, okay, it's time for me to go. I want to go see if I can find these planets. And I went down to the beach that's very close to my house here. And and I and I saw like three, I saw at least three. And I was so excited. And the place was pitch black because it was, right by a beach. And no, there wasn't any other humans around that I was chatting with. But I was so elated and felt such a part of this huge, huge reality. Just beautiful, just beautiful. And so, and complete silence, complete quiet. So that was uplifting. And I do think that that does make a difference in our world. I would say that, yeah, you did make a difference. I made a difference. All of us make a difference, even though it's not going to get in the news. Actually, I was very excited because I had been looking for information, any news media that was going to talk about this event. And I had just said to my friends right before I went down to the beach, we haven't heard a thing from anybody. And then I had the PBS NewsHour on, and at the very end, they said, "Oh, by the way, tonight." And I was like, "All right, I'm so glad that somebody said it out loud, for the consumption of the world, if you will."
Right.
So I'm with you with all that, and I'm listening to different spiritual practices that you're mentioning. Meditation, clearly being with other people. Seems like you have a morning and an evening kind of ritual that you are taking now more seriously, it sounds like, perhaps. I'm wondering, with all of that, um, what can you say about how we can be engaged, perhaps through the use of any art forms or any kind of, nonlinear kind of expressions that might be helping, certainly LGBTQ or anybody for that matter, in moving through and through this time and to be able to hold joy. I'd like you to talk about joy a little bit as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just want to say too about the marginalized communities, right? Even Alok says this. I was watching one of their podcasts the other day, and they said, um, when people ask what can you do for the LGBTQ plus community, well, maybe ask the individuals in the community what you can do for them, because it's not a one size fits all, right? So neither is it for any of us. However, I do think that there are some very basic things in life, right? And there is love, and there is joy, and there is despair and sadness and grief, and so for me, my spiritual practices, which I think is something we all right now need to kind of hunker down with in some way, whatever works for you. Um, and most of my practices have been going on for years and years, but you're right, Bernice, it's been getting more and more important to me. And it's like I wake up with that in on my mind in the morning now. And I I I have to do something before I go to bed as well. And I have several altars in my home. And when I say altars, I just mean little shelves where I put things on them that feel um, that they connect me to something greater than myself, whether it might be a star or it might be a shell. And I do have this one beautiful shell that was given to me when I was ordained as an interfaith minister. And in that shell, I keep slips of paper where I put people's names if I'm concerned about them in any way or know that they're going through a particularly difficult time so that I can speak their name out loud. And that's my morning spiritual ritual, one of them, where I light a candle. I say some form of a prayer that kind of turns my life over to love for the day. And then I write down names of people and speak them out loud on these pieces of paper. Um, and I also, when I'm finished with that, I sit in silence for quite a while, as long as I can, for however much time I have until the first session starts. And I silence for me right now is just critical. I need to let everything kind of quiet down in my body mind, but then wake up to whatever sounds I'm hearing beyond myself. And of course, we're just starting to get a little bit warmer and a little bit lighter, and the birds are out. And I'm just like opening my doors and listening to the sounds of those birds in the morning. And that just soothes my soul tremendously. And then at night, the other thing that I do is I will read book I'm currently, whatever spiritual book I'm currently wanting to read. And right now, kind of shout out to the Guild for Spiritual Guidance, but they're doing a retreat with Jan Phillips. So I'm reading her stuff right now. And so I'll just read a passage or a poem or something, and then just sit and hold those words in my heart and see where it takes me. And that's my evening ritual. And then I journal a little bit about my day. Was there anyone I could have done things better with? Was there somebody I should go back to and say, oh my gosh, did I offend in any way, or whatever it might be. I kind of,
I'm noticing that there are so many emotions too. And I feel it's important that we allow ourselves to feel these emotions, even the negative ones. There seems to be a tendency, like for instance, anger, which is really an expression of grief a lot of times. We have a lot to grieve right now. That's part of the shedding, part of, the deepening of our love when we come out the other side and even while we're in it. But there's a fine line between it's easy to get when you're doing these rituals, and I'm speaking from experience too, not just what I've noticed, to get into the spiritual bypassing where you know what I mean. So where you convince yourself that, you don't want to think anything negative or say anything negative, and, you just kind of don't even want to acknowledge reality. And that's just sort of a form of suppression of your emotions. Can you speak about that
Yeah.
a little bit in your experience with the communities you've worked with and in your own life?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think that's what we've been talking about so far has been how to handle yourself when those really difficult things arise, right? And they are arising more and more and more these days. And yes, you're right. We don't want to turn our backs on our sorrow, on our grief, on our anger, on our suffering. It's real, and it's becoming more and more real every day. And I think part of the work that happens with that is speaking it, giving voice to it, right? Acknowledging it. Um, Even as I said, find your community, find your island, but it's not just for a spiritual bypass kind of way. It's like find the people that you can talk to and really, um, let it out. Uh, Tell them how angry you are, tell them how upset you are. All of those things will lead you, right? That chaos, that anger leads you to the transformation, which has to have action in it. We have to take action at some point. And sometimes the action isn't a job, like some people are coming to me now because, I'm no young chicken anymore here, and I have a lot of friends who are older than I am, and I'm not young. And they're saying, I don't want to go out there and march. I don't want to go to Washington. I don't want. There's so many other sacred ways that we can make a difference in the world when we feel a call and we feel that anger and that grief and that despair to help us find balance, to be able to hold both the sorrow, the suffering, the despair, the anger on one hand, and then taking action and love and community and all of those things on the other hand.
Mhm.
We have to be able to hold it all.
Yeah, that's a good point. Not everybody, when we talk about taking action, that doesn't necessarily mean going out on the street. That's very intimidating. Even making phone calls and, it can be intimidating to people. I mean, I've gone in my activist days and spoken with the representative that, I had there in Colorado, and it was very, I was nervous, but, they were very welcoming, and I spoke to the, assistants, whoever the person was, and they listened. And so it's really not it's just getting over that initial fear, but there are other things. And it kind of reminds me of a quote I just came across from John F. Kennedy. And he says, we are not here to curse the darkness, but to light a candle that can guide us through the darkness to a safe and sane future. So for some people, it could just be as easy as being that place of wisdom and compassion, the elder person in your community that people go to for advice and comfort and, for that light. It doesn't
That's right.
necessarily have to be, yeah, go ahead.
And no, it's okay. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But also like to be that person, but also to create environments where we can be that for one another, right? Um, like I've been reaching out within my community to, just say, do you want to come and talk? Do you want to come and talk? We can put a list together of the things you might want to have conversation about or share or commiserate about, like anything. We can talk about spirituality. We can talk about grief. We can talk about the things you're dealing with, how you want to be active and what's stopping you, what's preventing you, or what things you might not even think of as action, but that are taking action, like getting together and having these communities where we can share with one another and really hold one another in a way that is affirming and
I think
loving.
that's crucial, the community building. It could be as easy as starting a meetup group or, talking to your neighbors. The community, the connection is what has been severed, and that's caused, so much turmoil. We see
Yeah.
it now unfolding, this hyper individualism.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'd like to sort of pick a little bit.
Go ahead.
Pick your brain a little bit, pick your reflections a little bit. We've been talking about uh, bringing to wholeness, I would say. And wholeness, I was saying this the other day to someone as well. Um, you can't leave any parts out if it's going to be whole. You can't sort of like leave out the parts you don't like. And so they go over here somewhere, and then everything else is whole. It just doesn't, has to include this, as we might say, integration of opposites. But you used the word love before. And I think that, and I think also talk about it as possible your God term or your source, your creator, and such. And I think most people um, think of God or love. I'll stay with love as only good. Only does good things. So what does this have to do with love, capital L, when we're not necessarily saying these are all good things? So how do you hold the tension of opposite? How do you recognize a process that can be big enough to hold that and still call it love? Because people have said to me, what do you mean by love? I mean, love is that very mushy word. It can mean almost anything. So say a few words about that.
Love can be tough. Love can be piercing. Love can be pointed, direct, even destructive. I know that sounds weird, but it can be. And love can be gentle and tender and kind. And it's all of it. That is the whole, I think, And you're right. So many people think when they hear the word love of, I don't know, mushy, romanticized, you know. uh, And yeah, okay, that's part of it. But it's honestly not the biggest part for me. The biggest part for me is kind of that, being able to hold the direct, piercing sort of sharpness that love is alongside the tender compassion um, and holding environment that love provides. They go hand in hand because unless we're speaking truth to power, unless we're really coming, and that to me is love, right? Speaking truth to power is love. And taking action uh, in order to in order to lift up communities that are in need of help and compassion and holding, that's love. And that's not easy. That's not easy. In whatever way that you do it, it's not easy. I don't know if that answers what you were asking me, Bernice.
I think it sounds to me like what I was getting out of it was love requires to see things as they truly are and accept things as they truly are.
Mm.
Right? like we have to accept, not accept as in, okay, well, we can't do anything about it, but just not, take the blinders off and the rose-colored glasses and just, okay, this is the situation we're in. So how are we going to come together and, again, community and help each other out? And this combined, with our actions and our feelings and our new language that we're coming, terms or whatever, creates a new story through which perhaps we can emerge into. Which is, I think is, one thing that we can all sort of coalesce around, unify around, is not just, fighting these forces of darkness or however we want to think of it, but what are we moving toward? What are we uniting around? It's a new story. The other, the other side that we feel, we don't really want their vision of their story to come to fruition, their Make America Great Again or whatever. That's a story. And that's why it's so strong. They're all united. And I'm not seeing that we have a united story yet. We're still very splintered and okay, here's this community and that community. And, I'm feeling a little, not frustration, but just I want us all to unite around each other's stories into one big, story of love and compassion and what was the term you used earlier, Dianne? Not advocacy, but you're an accomplice or
Accomplice. What it brings to mind for me, Linnell, is wasn't it Margaret Mead that talked about small groups of people, that sometimes that's what it really takes.
Yeah.
To me, I always think about Indra's net, right? These small groups of people, and Andrew Harvey has spoken about this, small groups of 20 people banding together to be in community and to raise up whatever it is that they need to raise up. And before you know it, there's 20 here and there's 20 here and there's 20 here. And those sparks of light, those are touching one another, reaching one another. And then we're huge, we're huge.
Indra's net. I
And
love that analogy.
yeah.
And that speaks to there's no separation,
Right.
we do and
We're all
say
connected.
reverberates.
Yes, absolutely. So think of us all as Indra's net. We are. And, Bernice, before you said about with the meditating and stuff, where do we find joy? I'll just want to mention really quickly. I know when you're out in the field, if you're someone who's out there taking sacred action all day long and you're exhausted and you're tired and you're right, when you come home, you've got to have something that helps you find the joy. You've and whether that's my friend and I, say, come home and dance, just turn on your music and dance around the living room. Or for me, I love dancing. That's great. And I love music that takes me there too. Certain music can take me to very deep, amazing places, and lift me up out of the darkness as well. There's also just, I feel like this. I feel like the familiar is dying. I feel like all that we have grown up with and been hopeful about and seen change in our lifetimes and it has started to feel familiar, we're losing it. And so I am reminding so many of my clients, go back to the familiar. What's familiar for you that brings you some sort of peace when you're not out there working hard for whatever purpose you are working hard for? So, my daughter recently said to me, Mom, I'm coloring again, you know, and when I journal, I do bring out my colored pencils, and words get colors. I see words in color a lot, and so, whatever it is that brings you back to the familiar, that makes you feel peaceful, I think is a beautiful thing to do and can bring you joy.
So the other thing I noticed when I went out to look at the planets last night by this beach in this gigantic open sky, twilight time, really no one around except all the energy, and the silence was, and I felt joy. It was joy. It was joyous to see these, to connect in some crazy way with these planets that I'm related to, uh, and are related to me, was a joyous experience. Uh,
Stardust to
Also,
us.
I'm sorry, go on.
Stardust to us.
Oh, yes, indeed. Which brings me to my comment. Thank you so much. There is a huge process going on, I believe, that requires enormous letting go and grieving the letting go, or a dying, that we all must do in order for something new to happen. And that's a different take on what we need to do when we come together, or how to hold the tension of the day that we've heard on the media, for example, or more importantly, with our conversation with our neighbors and friends. Uh, what is that current, and what does that have to do with love? Of all of the dyings that are going on, and I'm remembering in one of the stories of Brian Swim talking about this evolutionary process and the development of what he calls the noosphere, that is our coming together into oneness. We have a whole lot to let go of in order for that to be possible, to not do the spiritual bypassing that Linnell was mentioning before. So how do I do that? How do I let go of all of the assumptions of the way I thought reality worked, and to
Yeah.
go and imagine that something totally new is going to happen when everything around me looks catastrophic?
The first thing I want to say is cry, because honestly, I've been crying a lot. It Crying is not a bad thing. It is the washing away, right, of um, whatever it is that's troubling you. It is the release of whatever it is. And if there's someone there that you can go to, that you can cry with, it sometimes is even better. But crying alone is okay. I, and yelling, you can yell, there are many things we can do to release those feelings inside that are just overtaking us right now. Um, there are more and more and more of these little businesses popping up where you can go in and smash plates and take a baseball bat, and they have objects there that you can just demolish.
I love that.
And honestly, that moves that energy through your body. And that's what we're doing. That's what, it builds up and it builds up and it builds up. And then we have to let it go, release it, you know? I,
Well, there's
I
something
used,
inside you that wants to be acknowledged and not
right.
ignored,
That's right.
right? And it deserves to be expressed and brought up
That's right.
and loved. It is
That's right.
part of our grieving and shedding.
I can spend half of a session with a client with them in tears, raging, really having a difficult time. And all I'm doing is holding that space and listening
Mm.
and allowing for them to let that go until we can get to a place where I can say, you're not alone. You know, I see you. I get, we need to be seen and heard and understood. It's the most critical thing a human needs on this planet, is to be seen and heard and understood. And if we have someone in our lives that can do that for us, it will help to heal us immensely.
Mm.
It really will. So find people to do that with, or just allow yourself to let it go yourself, and then soothe you. You can self-soothe. I hope, we all have to learn how to do that too in life.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Dianne, this has been really a wonderful, deep, rich conversation. And I want to respect your time. We're coming to an end here. I wanted to give you an opportunity to tell our listeners where they might find out more about you and your work. And also if you had a poem or reading or something that you would like to share.
Sure. Where you can find out more about my work, call me. Um, or, Rev Disston LP is my Gmail, right? So REV Rev Disston DISSTON LP is licensed psychoanalyst. Rev Disston LP at gmail.com. And I have two short little quotes. And the first one is from Oscar Wilde, and that he says, "Where there is sorrow, there is holy ground." And the second one is from John Rodell, who I know that you all have interviewed on your podcast, and I love this man. But he says, "Tell them you love them. Tell them you love them like the clock is ticking. By the way, the clock is ticking." I love you, Linnell Hayden. I love you, Bernice Marie Daly.
I love you, Dianne. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Dianne. It's wonderful to be with you, and
So
thank you
wonderful to be with you.
for the dedication of your life work and your continued journey with us and among us. Thank you so much. Blessings.
Thank you.
Thank you for Stardust to us.